John Hamm, Elisabeth Moss. That's me, Vincent Kartheiser. I play Pete Campbell. This is Mad Men episode New
4.
Amsterdam, yeah.
The 4th episode.
4th episode.
I'm Alison Brie. I play Trudy Campbell, Vincent's wife on the show.
Pete's wife on the show.
The actor Vincent Kartheiser's
The
wife.
actor Vincent Kartheiser's.
But on the show.
But on the show. Pete Campbell and Vincent Kartheiser are both characters. Written by Lisa Albert, the cutest little hippie, and directed by Tim Hunter, the most adorable little toad of an old man. I love him. I'm really proud of that door. You know, as an actor, you never really get doors with names and offices, and it's always kind of been a fantasy, I guess, a hidden fantasy.
Yeah, it looks really sharp. You were proud of it, because after the table read, when I first met you, you took me over to see it.
That is true. I did take you over to see my office.
Hi, I'm Lisa Albert. I'm a writer-producer on Mad Men, and I wrote this episode.
Your wife is here, Mr. Campbell?
I think the reason that we did this episode is we really needed to humanize Pete, and so it really was Pete's episode, and it was a way of letting people into who this character was and to try and give him some dimension so that our villain was not just purely villainous. And this was our introduction to Trudy, to Pete's wife.
Oh, you all work so hard. How's Jennifer?
Pete Campbell's so proud of his wife for the first 2 episodes.
Well, I think she feels the same way. She's so proud to come in and visit at the office, present herself in front of all the secretaries, the working women, as she is not one of them.
Right, but somehow she feels superior, it feels.
She does. So proud, you know?
Look at that coat. Janie Bryant, our amazing costume designer, loved Alison Brie. and would absolutely, I would come into the room and she would have hundreds of outfits, and she absolutely loved dressing you.
It was a mutual love.
Yeah.
You have to love that coat.
Yeah, but I think she loved a lot of the things she got for you, and the character allowed her to kind of be decadent.
It's true. It's a fun character, I think, to clothe because of her new money, spoiled brat quality.
Yeah.
She just has everything, and always the perfect matching earrings and bracelet and purse and shoes, all matched. They do a great job with it, and it's so fun. And this is the moment where Trudy kind of notices Don. Oh, maybe they'll have an affair later. You don't know. I've suggested that a couple of times, but nobody ever takes me seriously.
I think everyone, including the men on the show, have suggested having an affair with Don Draper.
We shot this scene so late at night. This was I think this was the last scene that we shot in the episode.
Lovely.
And
You know that I want to give you
Vincent was going to have to leave to go do something. But he was such a gentleman. It was like everyone wanted to rush him off to go do it, and if he left, he wasn't going to be able to stay and do my coverage and talk with me, and he wouldn't leave. It was so nice.
Well, yeah. The other side of that is that the party was kind of over. I wish it was like something important.
They canceled the event.
I wish
Never
it was
mind.
something important. It was like, you know, one of my buddies was playing beer pong, and he called me, and I was like, should I stay to finish the scene? And it was a big debate, and then the game finished, so I figured I would stick around and at least say the words, if not act them out.
That's true. At least be a body. A nice eye line for me.
Yeah.
It was nice.
Yeah, here's another scene where it's like we're keeping basically another storyline alive, but our actors are so amazing that it actually turns into a good scene. You know, it's just servicing a story that sort of ended in the last episode and that will be continued. But Maggie's just so incredibly good, and the two of them together are so good. And Michael Gladis is so great. And the costumes, God, look at that hat.
Well, I'll let you see Miss Mencken out.
I mean, John Hamm is the holy grail of actors. To find an actor in his mid-30s who's that handsome, who's not unbelievably famous already, it's amazing. And why he wasn't unbelievably famous, your guess is as good as mine. He didn't get the role. This was the role. And they're all amazing. Christina, all of them. January.
I don't work with a lot of the cast. It's usually just Vincent and I doing stuff at home. And when we shot this episode, it was my first episode, and they're already everyone else's fourth episode, and I hadn't seen any of them because they hadn't been airing yet. So it was a really interesting dynamic to sort of feel like an outsider, not in a bad way, but just the character is sort of an outsider. She's still, like Vincent said, I think she has the sense of pride and sort of feels above these women that work in the office and feels like she's more a part of the life with her husband and is in with the guys that he works with and relates to them more than the secretaries. And it was especially interesting for me to then watch the series as it aired and watch the first few episodes and be like, oh my gosh, that's what they're doing at the office? And that's what Pete's really like when he's not at home? People would call me and be like, your husband is such a jerk. It's like, yeah, I had no idea.
I love this, too, because this is just sort of the vestigial from the last show of the dog showing up. And it's just like, who gets saddled with the dog? Poor Betty. I mean, it's funny, too, because I remember, we had to shoot this. Obviously, this is as an exterior, and we couldn't wait till it got too late because you can't shoot in Pasadena after a certain time. And it was that weird thing of, like, it's daylight, but it should be a nighttime scene. But in a weird way, this kind of twilight light, and remembering that as a kid you went to sleep when it was light out still and what that was like in the sort of late spring, and it kind of works. I like it.
It's an awkward position for her to be in.
You think so?
Yeah. The wife, you know what I mean, to come into that sort of domestic situation that you're not really a part of, and especially in this time period, like people didn't want to overstep their boundaries a lot more. You know what I mean? People were worried a lot more about being polite and stuff in that respect than today, where they just be like, "Get out of here!
Right.
I'm gonna go in there and talk to her about it. I'm calling the police."
Sorry, it's like such gaslighting, I don't know what you're talking about.
And I like that she comes in and then calls her on it, you know what I mean? Because she's trying to be polite. She's like, well, what are you talking about? I don't know what happened today. She's like, yeah, you do.
Yeah, these scenes between the women are great. We don't get to be on set for them ever, but sometimes you have a scene coming up right after, and you get the opportunity to kind of be around for these scenes. That, most of my scenes are in the office, and it is strange. It's almost like being on another set. The tone's very different.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever we're in the office, there's a lot of joking, and it's loud, and there's the clatter of all the background people talking, and all the typewriters, and it's kind of a lively environment. And whenever it becomes more intimate, it does change. There's a quietness that kind of comes over the sets, unless I'm on the set, in which case.
That's true.
Yeah.
I think the Campbells are the only characters that don't smoke on the show, and I appreciate that because I also do not smoke.
I also do not smoke, so I also appreciate it.
But there's certainly plenty of smoking that goes on around us.
But you get used to it. It's like anything. I mean, it's funny the things that people ask us about. People ask us about the cigarettes and the drinking, and as actors, I mean, they're nice props to have, but it's not a hindrance. It's a cigarette. It's a fake cigarette. You get used to it. It's a fake glass of scotch. You get used to it.
We were talking about, I can't remember exactly what the lead-in line was, but she's talking about this tremendously personal thing, and then Betty just says, I've always loved that house. I mean, it's just that thing of like, okay, you just went way farther deep than I'm comfortable with, so we're going to go back to real estate because that's what I'm comfortable with, And what I love about writing serials is that you're keeping alive these storylines that started, and Don's in such a different place in this episode, and he's actually pretty light in this episode. But even when you see him, all the stories that have come before are still so much alive in him, and I don't know, I admire it.
I love this scene.
This gentleman has since passed in an avalanche, unfortunately. He's a really fine actor and is naturally really great in this role. And we didn't really do it that many times, just a couple of times. And he was really great. He came with so many ideas for the scene. He had like 5 or 6 different things he wanted to be doing. You know, he wanted to be stringing a fishing line, and then he wanted to be cleaning golf clubs, and then it was like he had them all lined up. Like it was almost like an advertising executive would go into a boardroom. Like, there's these 3 or 4 things that I want them to say no to, and then this one that I really want. And after they hear these 3 or 4 ridiculous things, the golf clubs will sound really good. And Matthew just kind of looked at him and said, no, a glass of scotch. But, you know, that's how Matthew is. Matthew has a vision for the scene, and he knows how. He
wants it to be. Well, and that's especially about this scene, because remember he told us that story that he wrote this scene. I mean, it's straight out of his life. It's a friend of his from school, I think, and his family was just like this. And he remembers going home with him one time and witnessing a conversation like this that his friend had with his parents.
It's actually kind of expensive.
And so it's just, that's why it does just seem so accurate about these, you know, a certain type of people, or it's very specific.
Yes.
Oh, just the contempt that these people have for each other is so extraordinary.
No, I don't think that's a
I've seen it, and Matt's seen it too. You know, just these families that are just.
don't think it's a good idea.
Well, this is the side to Pete Campbell that if you're one of the people who does relate with the character, this is the true kind of catch-22 of the character, you know. He kind of can't win in life because of where the bar's set and what kind of person he is internally. His life is kind of a no-win situation in a sad kind of tragic way. It's not a life that I've had, but it's one that I can see and observe and relate to on a certain level.
I liked it because it just is the first time that you've seen Pete's family, and it does sort of give a lot of insight into the character and why he is the way he is. Whereas I think he can come off as somebody who always gets what he wants, and they always are talking about how his family has all this money, but then you see that actually his relationship with his parents, you know, is so cold. They're so cold to him. It's not what you expect, maybe.
Gosh, remember this scene?
Sexy.
This is just a corner, really. This isn't even an entire room at all.
No, the whole room.
This
It's
is
like
2 walls.
2 walls.
And a bed. And all around you is kind of cement and people walking and eating bagels, and you're getting undressed. And
we did the whole scene in the one shot, and it was just funny because we do it again and again. They'd be like, could you walk a little sexier? And then they'd be like, not that sexy.
Right.
Nobody knows.
I love that line. He's sick. What's wrong with him? Nobody knows. I love that. He's such a good writer.
Never have much luck unless I'm playing against Canada.
You know, and it's so great. Every episode, or every other episode, at least, there's a new client coming into these boardrooms, and they always bring an energy with them. And there's always it's like the X Factor every week, and it's always nice, you know, to have that thrown in the mix. And I think sometimes we try to impress them, you know. I belly dance. I'm a belly dancer. I started when I was a kid. I juggle,
fire,
balance things on my chin.
acrobatics.
The campaign Josh Weltman came up with, so I didn't have to do any, which is really nice. You know, we did have to sort of understand how an ad gets made and, you know, that kind of stuff, just to sort of make the scene seem real and to make the pitch. I mean, Josh didn't write the whole pitch. So to understand what the pitch was, we needed to understand what Josh's thinking was in coming up with the campaign. And I still want that prop, and I don't have it. I want that New York mock-up. And you'd think I'd be able to get it.
Yeah.
He's not totally sold on this idea.
I wonder if he's just one of those kind of guys, this character, you know. Whatever it was that came up right there, he was going to say, make me something better, just to push the envelope.
Right.
And I think that's the idea I was saying before, you know. I think nowadays especially, advertisers kind of come in with 3 or 4 kill ideas.
One of the things I love about this scene and this show, too, is this scene for Pete is so much about what just happened to him in the last scene. And it's so much about the way your personal life spills into your business life and your business life spills into your personal life. And the fact that he just got dumped on by his parents is so much why he does what he does in this scene. I mean, he does it for other reasons, too, but he's angry in this scene for reasons that have nothing to do with Don.
But it is a commodity. Walter, I'm surprised.
I wonder if Pete Campbell's accent is going to change after a couple years being married to Trudy Campbell.
You know,
I might just come in.
because Vincent makes fun of me because he says I do a Trudy voice.
A Trudy voice.
And
It's true. Oh, that is fan. I mean, mine becomes kind of southern because I can't help. No. Oh.
I do a Trudy voice as much as you do a Pete voice.
Yeah.
I'm basing my character off of you, honey, because you came in, way before me. But Vincent does like to do impressions of me.
Yeah, they're not very good.
No, they're not.
I don't like birds either.
Well, something else.
You all look so sharp on set. Everyone looks great, you know what I mean? And with their hair combed so perfectly, and the ladies too. I feel like you slip into your costume, it's difficult to not be in character because it's so, everything's done so well.
Getting in a suit every day was great, and it was something I'd never done for a character before, and now I find myself wearing more suits in real life.
The first time someone's been unhappy.
Pete so much wants to be creative, and really what he does do is he entertains clients and he gets them laid, and he takes them out, and he's a pimp basically, and that's not a very dignified job. And obviously the sort of the competition between the creatives and the account people.
I have ideas.
I love this scene. I loved it when I read it, and I literally, Matthew Weiner knew precisely how he wanted this presented to Don Draper, and it was kind of about living up to his image of it. Pete has good ideas. He just presents them poorly sometimes.
Well, I think it's the idea of what he's trying to impress people. After seeing him like that with his family, it's just sort of like he always feels like he's not getting what he deserves. He's not getting the respect he deserves. He's not getting, the position he deserves. Like he always feels like he's owed something, which is, I think, why people don't like him.
See, they never have two walls for their apartment.
Yeah, they have
It's like a full house inside a studio. Like
true.
It's a working kitchen. It's they got 87 channels. No, but it is a beautiful home built inside of a studio, really.
I love just seeing things like the phone cord, just things that just don't exist anymore, and that was just sort of, we had to kind of make a little area for her to talk on the phone in, and it really wasn't ideal at all, and so we had but then you end up with that great shot of a long phone cord that's just such a kind of memory, of that image. And poor Betty's cord isn't long enough, of course,
Take your time.
I think the actual, and I don't want to out anybody in real life, but I think the actual smokers smoked. Vincent does not smoke, and his character does not smoke. And I think one of the reasons is you can always tell a non-smoker when they're smoking. Were you ever a smoker? Me too. And it's just like that person's not inhaling. So we wanted people, and that, of course, is Matt's son, Martin. And that 5 cents a piece for laundry was something that was actually Tom Palmer, who worked on the show. That was his childhood. He got 5 cents a piece for ironing.
That's Matt's son, and he's a good little actor. He's got good genes. Matthew's wife is a beautiful and brilliant woman, and Matthew is full of life, and those are the kind of people who should be breeding. Sorry, it's an early morning here in Los Angeles.
I love the scenes though with January and Matt's son. I don't know. Those are some of my favorite scenes in this episode because it's such an interesting match. Like she's so odd. Like her character is just so odd the way she relates to some people. Like again because of what she feels like she's supposed to be.
But I will say, having been a young man at one point in my life, having been 6, 7, 8 years old, I think there are not love, but I think there are relationships that are strong. I remember I invited my second grade teacher to see me in a play. she came with her boyfriend, but I had bought her flowers, you know? Like, I really wanted to impress on her how I felt, and I think she understood, even if she kind of didn't give what she should to it. I think there was a look in her eyes at that time that understood that I would someday be a man. And I understood that relationship. And I think it's something that we all go through as young men.
Well, yeah, but I'm talking about not even just where he's coming from.
Oh, shh. I love this scene.
This is my favorite scene in the whole piece. This is one of the great emasculation scenes ever.
I really like this scene. It came off so seamlessly, too. And I think
It's true, they shot it really well.
I think we were all a little nervous. It was like our first scene together. I mean, what was our first scene together?
The office scene.
Oh, yeah, it was. But this was kind of...
This was our second. It was like our second, yeah.
The first kind of like 3 or 4 page kind of like...
It was, and all 4 of us were in it, and it's kind of fast-paced, and again, we shot it just over right in the corner of this large, beautiful restaurant. But you know what I mean? They sort of make it look so full, and we're just kind of right over on this little side.
The restaurant that doubles for 15 places.
Yeah.
Oh, she's just an unstoppable force. I mean, it's hilarious. I love the way the scene is shot. I love the way the scene is edited. I love everything about this scene. And I love the costumes. And I love the sets.
I very much think Pete Campbell is suffering her parents in this scene. They are too enthusiastic for the conversation. Even though he doesn't necessarily, I don't think Pete Campbell looks to his parents and says, that's who I want to be. I think he's raised in a mannered culture in which there are ways in which you address another person, even if what you're talking about is terrible. There is this kind of code, this silent code that is followed, and her parents just don't know it.
Right, it's called uptight. And
no, it's not uptight. I mean, I think it's part of the upper class that new money can't buy.
Right.
It's that thing that you just cannot buy. It's like it's a secret. It's like the skull and bones, you know. And so he's tolerating them here, but they're great actors, you know. And one of the things Matthew Weiner has done is all the characters. He just has such a great eye for talent, and he's just getting these amazing actors that are fulfilling their characters and bringing so much color to everything. I know we all feel so blessed.
Especially
with
because
the other actors.
Their characters inform ours in so many ways because they're playing our parents, you know what I mean? And it's great to see the difference between Pete and Trudy is that she, you know what I mean? She's a little more carefree. Oh, it'll just happen. Oh, you'll make more money. Oh, it's fine. You know, and Pete's sort of carrying this burden, you know.
This scene was really easy for me to do. I felt like we did it a few times, and it felt great every time.
Mm-hmm.
No crew, just us and mics. You know, they mic the car and then...
And the cab driver was sitting in the front seat.
Yeah, but not for that stuff, I don't think.
It's true, it was just us.
This one he was there for, but from that side.
Not from the side angle, yeah.
And I think this is an interesting scene, too, you know. It's man and woman. It's, you're locking yourself in, you're committing yourself to a person, and there's always that question of, do I really know this person? You know, and you start to see... Especially for a man, I think you start to kind of see how your life is going to change and the compromises you are going to have to make every day. Mm-hmm. And the conversations you're going to have to listen to.
I just think it's such a good... Yeah, when we shot it, everyone was like, that's the scene. Like, it really feels like a husband and wife. Whenever I think about their characters, I always think that Pete Campbell sort of met his match in Trudy. You know what I mean? And in that scene, it's sort of what you're talking about. He tells her not to do something, and she just kind of does it, and it's like... kind of wants to brush out. You know, it's sort of like her power. It's a subtle power that she has over Pete. The manipulative little...
I don't know if it's so subtle. It's kind of overpowering, and the way I see it is it's just unrelenting. It's just, she just doesn't stop saying this is what's going to happen.
Yeah, I guess that's true. But it's so funny the differences between the way other people look at the characters and the way that you look at the character when you're inside it. Because even after this episode aired, my dad was like, God, too bad you have to play such a spoiled little bitch or something, you know. And I thought, God, Dad, I took it really offensively because on set, you know, the only notes I got were just be yourself.
I mean, and I remember when we were talking about this scene, you know, when Betty gets on the toilet, we had to deal with the fact that what they wore was just so, it takes a long time to sit down on a toilet if you're a woman. And it made life much easier if she didn't have stockings on. And there was discussion about whether or not a woman would leave her home without stockings on. Look at this. I mean, you can't just pull your pants down. There's so much going on under there. There's a girdle and there's garters and there's all kinds of stuff. And we really had to have discussion about whether or not she would leave the house without pantyhose. We rationalized it.
We wear the full stockings and garters and girdle. I don't always do the A-line dresses, but like I said before, it really helps you slip into the characters because the way they walked, the way they, you know what I mean? It does. It affects the way you sit down, the way you relate to other people. Are your shoes hurting your feet? Are you sitting appropriately for the length of your skirt? But I love it. It makes me feel a lot more relaxed about what I'm eating during the day. So I think, I'm going to be wearing that girdle later. Nobody's going to know.
I actually resisted this storyline mightily. I thought it was just as creepy as a thing could be. But, from Matt's perspective, particularly the whole thing when she cuts the lock of hair, which all the women in the room were like, I would never do that. Matt's point was, and I think when you watch it, it actually works, was that these two people are contemporaries. I mean, she's a child. She's a child. And she probably having as real a relationship with him as she does with Don. And certainly that's not true. But she's just so childlike. And I think that's what this was about mostly, was that she's just not fully formed, Betty. And she's kind of play acting at being a grown-up. And this interaction is just, it's almost like it's a peer. It is creepy, and that's the point.
Oh, see, I like their relationship because, and you're talking about, Vincent, where the little boy is coming from, and I'm talking about where she's coming from as a woman, as a grown woman with a husband and kids, who still finds that she kind of can relate with him better than she can relate with some other people.
Well, she's all alone, isn't she, all day?
Well, that's true, and even I just feel like there's this air that everyone was presenting, you know what I mean? But especially this kind of housewife, that you want to seem like you have the perfect life. You're not talking about your problems with your friends. The fact that she goes to a psychiatrist is totally taboo.
She actually, she receives that as if it's a real compliment and not as if it's a child, it's not, that's not a there moment for her where she's kind of patting his head. She's actually being complimented by this little boy. It's just so odd. And of course they had to put a little fake piece of hair in there for her to cut. And then the way this whole plot ends up playing out in the course of the season, I have to say I did love.
Lock of hair. That's so cute. No one does it anymore. No one does the lock of hair. I kind of wish they did,
I think it's cute that she's flattered that he asked for it.
Yeah, she's very little girlish there too. The pose that she takes with her legs almost not touching. Mm-hmm. It's real cute.
So this bar scene was shot in the same place where we shot that restaurant.
Yeah.
Scene.
This was a fun scene to do. I really loved pitching this guy, and it was different than in the boardroom. I really felt like Pete was excelling in this environment, but he's also very kind of weary of being the pimp. And because of the scene that came earlier with his dad where he says, it's no job for a white man, and kind of, there's this other scene with Trudy's father where he says, dining and whining all day long. And I think he would like to think of himself as professional and serious and sober, and I think he wants to think of himself as Don Draper, as getting there on his merit. But obviously he's gotten a lot of help to get where he is, and no matter how good he is, he'll kind of always be viewed that way, I think. And so this scene, in a way, can be a little, it's a pensive scene for him almost, because he's being objective about what's really going on. It's so dirty.
I know.
Yeah, I don't care.
I know, I love that look on your face.
we loved the idea that Helen Bishop, who was kind of the alien on the block, was the only person voting for Kennedy. She's divorced. I mean, she's just, she's a radical. And so, she just seemed like the perfect person to kind of carry that banner. And I mean, for Betty, this is, she's dying. I mean, she's so curious about this woman.
Well, looks like Don Draper was home with them.
That's true.
Being daddy man, which probably meant sitting in another room doing work while they ransacked a room.
But look at the great idea he came up with.
Cheesy. Sorry. I'm partial to Pete Campbell's idea.
The ad consultants can tell us, like, they would never have had time to make color mock-ups in the time period, so that's why they're black and white. I mean, the details like that are just like, oh, that's good.
And I'm writing down something probably really banal.
Salvatore in the background smoking his cigarette.
So luxuriously.
Yeah.
This is a weird moment where I think it happens in all of our lives, where you have this great moment of kind of pleasure and excitement that you were right, but maybe the person you were right with is your superior or someone who can very quickly change your life, and you're having a hard time not being happy about it. Or in Pete's case, smug, I guess, about it. And now,
So excited.
And now this action happens. It's a difficult little moment.
I just like that.
He tries to humble himself here.
Well, I just think he has no idea, how Don is going to take it. Like, he knows he's going to be a little irked, but he sort of still feels like he won.
Yeah.
To be dressed down by someone who doesn't even look you in the eye is so much more insulting than being dressed down by someone who does at least acknowledge your presence. Oh.
He's so great. And Salvatore, kind of the knowing observer of everything. You kind of get the feeling Sal gets everything. And has a little moment with Pete here.
Yeah. You picked the wrong time to get an apartment. He just knows.
This was
push his button.
This was a fun scene to do too.
This walk is just, and here's where Pete, it's everything you need to know about him. I mean, he's just terrified. This tossing the Bob Newhart album is one of those things that's so easy to write on the page, and you have to, I don't know how many takes we shot of it to get it to land right.
That took so long to get right. At least I think it took so long to get right.
I think she doesn't even move. She just looks at it and goes back to work. Oh, Pete.
She's the best. And these two together, whenever they're on set together, it's first of all, your job becomes a lot easier because you can always shoot the coverage of these two, but it's a lot more fun too. They really are a great team.
And I like the fact, I mean, there were people who didn't get, like, why Don was so mad because it, like, worked out. And it's just like the idea that there just are rules in this industry, and Pete just breached a big one. And who cares if the outcome is okay for the agency? That's not what it's about. Look at him. He's oh, God, he's heartbreaking.
I know.
Wow. I like that shot coming down to the scotch.
And I do love the therapy scenes because she so rarely tells the truth.
Talk about it, January. Let it out. I love these scenes.
Yeah, it's just interesting to see this character's perspective on everybody else and he just doesn't ever do anything. you know?
Right. Well, it was very popular then, forget what it's called. I think it's a Freudian technique to like not really speak or anything.
Right, just take notes.
Right.
Because of what pans out in the course of the show, what we find out about Dr. Wayne and the fact that he's on the phone with Don, instead of being something that is, empowering for Betty, I hate that word, but it diminishes her. It takes power away. She's not even in control of her own therapy. I just think it adds to that sense that she's just such a pinned down butterfly.
I just think that at that time, people sort of wanted to come off as perfect. You know what I mean? You just want people to think that your family life is in order, that you've sort of got it made, that you don't have problems, especially not mental problems, like that. I mean, even now, that's a taboo thing to someone in your family's crazy.
That's the greatest look
drops
he gives
to
him.
it,
He just look, and you don't even have to see. It's so good. You don't even have to see the front of John's face to know what his face does. It's a really amazing moment.
Taking the shoes off, I don't know who pitched that, but I do love it, and I love that Roger wears lifts, and you see that little chunk down. And all of this, I mean, all of that, just the hot potato of like who has power, and just what Cooper just did by having that. I mean, everybody diminishes the only person who has power is Cooper.
There's rules.
The plot thickens.
Well, one of the things I look forward to seeing in the upcoming seasons is who's right and who's wrong in some of these things. I think one thing that I find interesting about Matthew Weiner is sometimes the person who you think is imparting wisdom, that kind of the intelligent viewpoint, is sometimes really wrong. There's a line at the end of the season where Robert Morse says, "You never know how loyalty is born." And I look forward to see if that truly is how loyalty is born. The old wise man in the office sometimes steers you wrong. Mm-hmm. One thing Matthew Weiner always tries to do is not what we expect, but maybe what's most likely.
So what? Well,
This whole episode it's about what is valuable. And for Don to have to contend with the fact that Pete has this value to the firm and that they're not willing to let it go. I think he's about to say, he's more valuable to the firm than I am. And just, look at John's feet are scrunched up, which I think is fabulous. He's tense.
This is true, too. We've run into advertising executives, even now, who say that it's still that way, that there's still family names in the advertising company, and it's still about old connections and old relationships. The scene begins with showing that Cooper and Sterling have some sort of relationship that, in a way, Sterling is Pete Campbell. Not that he is, obviously. Everyone's their own individual, but Sterling was born with a bit of a silver spoon himself. So it's going to be interesting to see where the loyalty does begin to fall. Especially now, since at the end of the season, Don Draper has taken, in a way, Sterling's job,
Mm-hmm.
I'm so glad I wasn't a man in 1960. Just looks hard. As a man, you were supposed to be, and I think this is part of what the whole series is about, as a man, you were supposed to be having it all. And look at how constrained you are. You can't even tell someone to go shove it when it's all you want to say. I guess you still can't. You kind of can more, though.
It's funny for me to see. I watched part of the pilot when I was in New York a while back. And there he goes whistling a tune. That's so perfect. I happen to have 3 colics in my hair, and they've found a certain mixture that works for me. But it's funny to see how the hair has kind of come into its own on each person and how the hairstyles have changed.
Mm.
And this scene was intimidating for me to have these 2 guys who I respect so much kind of coming at me with this great dialogue. I was a little intimidated at the beginning of the day.
This was Matt, just, the brilliance of just having Roger tell this lie. And John's expression of like, I did what? This is Don Draper's worst nightmare, to have Pete Campbell think that he did anything for him.
I like that you feel intimidated at the moments when your character is going to feel intimidated. It's very method of you, Vincent.
It's not very method of me. I don't have many scenes where John Slattery gets that close to my face. It's like you all of a sudden become very aware of everything you're doing. You're like, man, don't judge me, Slattery. I'm just a man like you. No, it's beautiful. They do all the work in that scene, and I love John Hamm behind it all, kind of not realizing what the hell is happening.
But owning it, but still
totally
owning
owning it, never giving away anything. It's good dramatic irony.
That's true.
I love the scene because Roger needs to sort of make amends with Don. I mean, he sold Don out in the Cooper scene, and they need to kind of get back on track with each other, and that's what the scene is. But he won't just make nice with him. He has to do it in this kind of very oblique, backhanded way. That's how men were able to make nice with each other. The whole thing, it's just such a weird dance. I mean, he's basically doing it by insulting him. And then this line is just like, that's as close to a true blow that ever happens in this episode. And then there's a pause, that great sort of thick pause of just like, is this going to go bad or not? And Roger, being eternally political, doesn't let it.
Oh, see, they did the cutaway. Oh, but they go up to his face in that shot. Nice. It's interesting to see that process. The directors are to different levels in different scenes. I think most of the directors kind of see how the scene is working, and then they step in if there seems to be something that's not in line. You know, it's kind of a direction by necessity basis. But they're always different, and you know, the attitude on this set, the first season was so great, and so.
It was always nice having Matt there when he would come by, because he also just sort of knew exactly how, it should go, exactly how.
An infusion of energy.
Yeah.
I really like that actor a lot. He does a great Marlon Brando impression.
Oh, he's great. My dad, he's great. And she is too. My mom's
she
outfit.
Is so amazing. I love that outfit.
And her look too, because we kind of look alike. So proud.
204th Street.
It's ridiculous. Oh, can you imagine?
This is our set. They actually gave us 4 walls for this one.
They built our whole new apartment because we're going to be using it now that it's our new place.
Yeah. They built. No, well, it's not the whole thing. They built.
But just that one room anyway.
The one room.
The
with
whole
the
living room, dining room.
And we get our own backdrop.
We do the city backdrop.
Oh wait, I love this music.
Yeah, and I had to be improving lines here. Thank God you don't hear any of them, because I have no idea what we were saying.
Such good use of music in this show.
I have to say, as I was born and raised in New York, and Matt wasn't, and Matt loves New York as much as any New Yorker I've ever met, and I love that about him. I don't even know why, but he has a love affair with New York that is deep.
And that's beautiful. That's the first CGI shot that I was involved with on the show.
Oh, really?
That's not a backdrop. That's CGI.
It's
green screen. Well, look at the cars moving.
I know.
This is an old shot from the 1960s of New York that they CGI'd in there.
I love that last scene too. Sorry, just because I like how they step away and it's like she's in control. It's like Pete really, you know what I mean? It's Pete's departure from control in the marriage, which he takes back promptly in the next episode.
Well, I don't know about
with her, he tries to regain it. But
I really, that was one of my favorite episodes to shoot, and I really loved it. I'm glad I got to see lots of parts of it that I haven't seen before. So
Yeah.